Welcome to Saints in the Parish. Join us each week as we reflect on one particular aspect of Catholic teaching and spiritual life. I'm happy to be with you with Donald Paul Maddox as we celebrate Labor Day. Today we're talking about labor. What a great subject it is. The Catholic Church has been really in the forefront of understanding that gift of labor that God has given us. So we have to understand it in the context of what God has given us.
Happy to be back again. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. We invite you to do that and like the video and share it if you find this really helpful. But so I think in America, specifically, since most of us are in America, I think as a society, we obviously value work. Like that's kind of our highest noble principle is the American dream and working hard and getting better for yourself, better for your family and better for society, and which is not necessarily a bad thing. That's a good thing. However, I think the way the church views work is a little bit more nuanced than that.
We might even say the way God would view our work,
right,
which the church is helping us to understand.
Yeah, exactly. So in the tradition, in the church, work or labor has always been considered like a holy endeavor. And it's a way that we participate in God's work, God's creative act. So we see in Genesis, right? So God creates the world, and then on the seventh day he rests from work. And then God creates man, and then God's command to Adam is to work, to till, to protect and care for the garden. And then flows from that to Eve, and then to all of creation. So we see God even commands us to work, to labor. But what does that entail, or what is that specific work? And that's what I think we want to talk about today. And God doesn't mean you need to quit your job and go work in the vineyard. Work, how do we participate in God's work in our specific daily lives?
So a couple of things. First of all, Christ too, was out. He was with the fishermen, and he contributed often in doing that with his disciples, realizing that they had to eat, and we work to eat. And so we see Christ too. We see both in the Old Testament and New Testament this need for us to work, and also for us to have a certain, it helps us to have a certain value in our lives if we can. Keep in mind, not all people can work, and that's the reason why we help each other. We help our brothers and sisters that can't work. We pray for those underemployed. There's some people out there in the world today that can't find a job that is what they need in order to really support their family. And so they're underemployed. And then there's some unemployed people. And that is very difficult on those families that have a husband or wife that are unemployed. So I think that's what we should keep in our prayers today as we talk about labor and the value of labor, is pray for all of those people that are unemployed throughout the world.
Yeah, and the church too is specifically. I was reading a Wednesday catechesis from Pope Francis. I think it was in 2022 on the feast of Saint Joseph the Worker. Who's Saint Joseph is kind of the model of workers, and Pope Francis in that even mentions what you're talking about, that we even have, as human beings, we have a duty, and we even have a right to fair labor. We have a right to be able to find suitable labor, and that's something that the church strives for every person, and then also in their place as kind of the world's moral authority is kind of what everybody sees the Vatican as, and it's their job to advocate for people and for the dignity of every person. So Pope Francis in that Wednesday catechesis has a really, really nice quote, and he says, "Work is an essential component of human life and even a path of holiness." So not only is it something that we do in our daily lives, but Pope Francis even makes the connection that it's even a path for us to greater holiness. So what would you say to somebody about that if they were asking, how does work contribute to our holiness?
Well, in many ways. So I remember reading a document that was written by the church called Rerum Novarum, and it was written in 1891 by Pope Leo. Way before there was any talk of unions or any talk of quality of work there was way before there was any talk of helping protect workers. And I remember studying this, and my father had a very difficult job, manual labor job. He worked outside. He was a pipe fitter, so you can imagine, at a large paper mill. So you can imagine how difficult that works. And I remember reading the document, and I remember, saying to myself how important that was, based solely on my interaction with my father working. I'm sitting here reading Rerum Novarum, which is on human labor, and it's a document by the church. And don't get overwhelmed sometimes by these church documents. Let's embrace them, try and read them, try and synthesize them, and that's part of what we're doing. Is we're trying to put these church documents in the hands of the people, trying to help people understand, why would the church in 1891, before the turn of the century, the 20th century, care about that? Because they cared about the soul of the person. They cared about the individual. They didn't want them to get hurt at work and therefore not be able to provide for their family. But the answer to your question, I believe that even putting food on your table for your family, it contributes to a certain holiness. You know what I mean? There was did my father necessarily like his job? Being out in the sun, working very hard, sometimes 12 hours a day, so that we could have paper towels and toilet paper and all that. He probably didn't like it all the time, but he knew that what he was doing was contributing to the well-being of his family, of his wife and his children. And I think that's true for most people. Many are blessed, and I think that's one reason why, as you're being formed and helping your children and your grandchildren to be formed at a very early age, you kind of want to help them to develop a skill set so that they can maybe find some work that contributes to what they enjoy doing. Like, I can give you lots of examples. I mean, you take an architect, could be someone that likes to design and draw and build things. That's great. Or a graphic artist, for instance. Someone who's an artist and just is able to hone those skills in and really enjoys doing his work. I know certainly true for me as a priest. And although not necessarily priesthood is my work, but what I do as a priest in my work, I enjoy most of the time. Not everyone is able to find that value, and they still have to work, and they still have to have a job. But part of our whole formation, part of our whole discussion here, is helping people to develop a good skill set so that they will have options. They will have doors open to them so that they can find some work, and it will be something that they enjoy doing. But I think that the holiness comes from that is a part of the puzzle. Mm-hmm. It's a part of the puzzle.
Yeah, and I think, going back to go back to Genesis, we participate in God's work. So our act, and it could be the most mundane, stocking shelves at your local grocery store or whatever, like, just because it might not be something that you find your passion in, like, you can grow in holiness in whatever state you are in, because we as human beings, like, we find our dignity in doing things, right? Like, for better or worse. And I think participating in the creation of things, we're not creating the world, but like, a graphic designer, creating a logo for a company, like putting your own like creative spin, like that is like, we find dignity in like creating things, and like that's a holy endeavor.
And I mean, you could find yourself being a delivery person out in the heat, every 7 days, 5 days a week. And how do you find your holiness in that? I mean, sometimes, you have to understand that what you're doing for other people is important too. You're providing goods and services for other people. I mean, or being an emergency room nurse or emergency room doctor. I mean, you see things that most people would never see in their lives, and but yet that this is needed in order for people to live. So we have to kind of understand that in the context of holiness too.
And I think also going in with like a certain mindset too of like, if you're a delivery worker, like offering up, like bring prayer. It doesn't have to be explicit prayer, but bring prayer into your work. Like, man, it's really hot today, but like, I'm going to offer this little suffering up for X, Y, or Z, so bringing intentions into your work, or even as simple as like, you might be doing a task that you don't find very enjoyable, but like putting your effort into it, like that's also teaching you virtue. It's teaching you the value of perseverance and the value of being thankful for the fact that you even have a job and that you can provide for your family. So even in those little acts, like we can be formed to be more of who God is calling us to be.
Now, we appreciate your opinions too. So, take an opportunity to share with us a little bit about what your opinion on this is in the comments. And we enjoy kind of reading them. And it also helps us kind of know where you, our audience, where you are at in your lives. And you don't necessarily, it's not necessarily agree or disagree. We're kind of giving you the catechism. We're kind of giving you sacred scripture. We're kind of giving you the documents of the church. But that's more on an objective level. And what you're doing is putting it into a subjective level. So you certainly do help us by commenting on anything that we've said, because that really helps us understand. And also, it also helps us greatly in understanding as we're trying to reach people, are we reaching people with what the church says? I mean, I've read many church documents, and some of the church documents I've read, I'm like, I don't even know how I'm going to necessarily translate this or make it relevant in people's lives. Interestingly enough, that wasn't true for Rerum Novarum at all. I completely understood that, not only in the context of my own parents' labor and how they worked, but also how I see so many other people labor so hard in the world and get the value. Now, on a secular level, which, we live in a world and we don't live necessarily of the world, but we live in a world. And in the United States of America, the average person contributes 6 times what they consume. And that's the reason why, I mean, you think about that statistic, it's a pretty incredible statistic. This is the average worker. He produces 6 times what he or she would consume. And that's the reason why we're able to share with so many other people in the world. And we as a country are extremely generous, particularly as it pertains to food and needed sustenance for other people in the world.
Yeah. And then again, our work contributes to the health and well-being of other people. Again, it might not be explicitly like, a nurse or a doctor contributing to the health of their patient, but, the better that we produce goods and make them, holy and for the good of the human person, like the more that benefits society as a whole and makes us as society grow to be a more perfect example of what God is calling us to be. Before we go to the next part, which is specifically like on which Rerum Novarum talks about, like on the dignity of the worker with works, labor and stuff. I wanted to read a quote from John Paul II, St. John Paul II, on labor. And he says, "Work is a good thing for man, a good thing for his humanity, because through work, man not only transforms nature, adapting it to his own needs, but he also achieves fulfillment as a human being, and indeed, in a sense, becomes more a human being."
That's great, isn't it?
And again, we become more human being because, again, we're participating in what God has called us to be from the beginning, which is a co-worker with him in the world. And he says, not only do we transform nature, we don't abuse it, but we transform it. There's a reason why, most of us have air-conditioned buildings, because it's typically better for us to not be in 100-degree heat all day. That's the kind of thing of like, that's a good thing. Like, we've created that to, help people live longer and live better lives and be healthier and eat well and all that stuff. Like, we are working with what God has given us to enhance the dignity of every human being. And that's what John Paul II is talking about here. And I think that's the church's understanding of the dignity of work. Like, work is a good thing. And again, talking about today, specifically Labor Day, this is a day where we, in a sense, kind of give thanks for the value of work, but also for the value of rest. Like, God rested on the seventh day. And for us, what more do we do on the seventh day than we go worship God, like on Sunday at Mass? Like, there's a reason why typically, like, Sunday is a day of rest. Like, we don't work for work's sake, but we work to be more in line and more conformed to what God is calling us to be, which are sons and daughters of Him, which we find, at the Mass when we consume Him in the Eucharist.
And if you talk to people that work 7 days a week and they just work all the time, you'll tell they need to rest and they need to participate at church. It's so important. It's a part of our lives of contributing to our holiness. So you can't just leave that part out and just say, I'm going to work all the time. And then I go back to Scripture. You can gain the whole world and lose your life. Mm-hmm. You can work, gain the whole world, and then not be fulfilled at all. And kind of lose your life. And so want to make sure that doesn't necessarily happen to us in our lives. I think part of the reason why we encourage our young people to be involved in service projects is to make sure that they're doing some work that isn't necessarily oriented just for themselves, but it's oriented for others. So some work. So if you have the opportunity to rake your grandmother's yard, that's important to do that. If you have the opportunity to, help maybe bring a neighbor to the doctor who doesn't have any transportation or something like that. I mean, that's work too. We have to make sure that we don't understand work as just simply our job, but all of the work that we do in helping to volunteer. And I think it's so vitally important for us to find something to kind of volunteer to do in work, and that really does kind of make a difference in our lives. We see value in giving to other people, and so we certainly encourage you to do that too. And as we celebrate Labor Day here, we're just reminded that not only is it valuable and it's an essential need in our lives, but it's also the way our vocations work as a human being. So we see value in it on its most rudimentary level as a part of our vocation, whether we're a husband or a wife, a single person, a religious, whatever we may find ourselves. We see that as really important. I try and give out some homework on our podcast. I know I run into a couple of you here and there, and y'all make a comment about that. And so I think that that as we gather together on Sundays, the Lord's Day, to take some rest, why don't we make an effort to go to church a little early, maybe stay a little late, and pray for those people that are unemployed, and pray for their families, and pray for their children. Pray for those people that really are in need. And I know some of them that just are really in need. I mean, they live kind of paycheck to paycheck, not sure exactly how they're going to feed their family this week or next week. And that's stressful. And so that is something that we can do in our lives. You have a good suggestion of some things that they can do?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, just give thanks to God that if you do have a job, that you have a job. That's a good thing. And I think also to know that your dignity as a human person is not found solely in your work. So your dignity is found in being a child of God, right? Work is part of that, and it's a necessary component of that. Again, whether that's a job or whether that's caring for your family or whatever you're doing. But just to remember that, don't find your dignity in what you do. Like, you have dignity in who you are. And I think in our world, especially in the United States, we can get caught up in, the numbers. Like, what am I producing? How much am I producing? How much money am I making? Am I, increasing my savings rate, or am I, is my portfolio going up? And there's nothing specifically wrong with that. But if we get caught up in that, we get, I think we get drawn into, my dignity is tied to how good am I at what I'm doing. And that's not true.
We don't want to fall into that trap.
Don't fall into that. And the church is crystal clear, again, from Reverend Navarro onward, that your dignity is found in your work. Like, it is important that you work for your dignity and working for the sake of the other person. But ultimately, like, you work so that we can rest in the Lord on Sundays, as God rested after he created the world. So I would offer that specifically on Labor Day, when most people don't work, it's a national holiday. Just remember that, take time to be appreciative for what you have, and then for the rest that you are given. And that's a good thing.
And most people spend some time with their family on that day. And I think that's that's just a wonderful opportunity to spend some time with your family and your friends, and really just enjoy a beautiful day.
Thank you for joining us. Like I said before, if you haven't subscribed, please do so. Leave us a comment on what you're doing specifically on Labor Day to celebrate this day of rest. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
God bless y'all.